Welcome to another episode of the Etsy Conversations podcast resource episode. And I am your host, Ijoma. Sorry, that sounded repetitive. But this week I am continuing with the Ultimate Guide to Etsy Search series. And this is chapter 2, and it's all about keywords and what you need to know in order to use the right keywords to get found in search. Keywords are a really important tool for making sure your listings show up in Etsy search. And Etsy in this article talks about what you need to know and do in order to optimize your search, your rankings in search. So as I mentioned in the episode a couple of weeks ago, Etsy uses the keywords that you use in your tags, your titles, the categories, and attributes to match the searches that shoppers are putting in. And when there's a match, then all the listings that fit that particular search are gathered together. After all those listings are gathered, then based on additional factors, those listings are then ranked. And so now I'm going to go through the different how the different tags, titles, categories, and attributes work when it comes to where your listings rank in search. First up are your categories. Your categories, you'll notice you see them listed in the tags section as well because they act like tags too. And so Etsy recommends that you add the most specific category that you can, because that will increase the chances that you get matched with the search, because people search for very specific terms. And so the more specific your categories or subcategories, the more likely you are to show up for searches. And if the subcategory you select belongs to multiple categories, Etsy will include those categories as well in your listing so that you can be found multiple ways. Oh, also, yeah, if you have a category or subcategory, because those terms show up in your tags, you don't need to repeat them. I think there some time ago there was the thought that if you say you listed patterns and then knitting patterns, you had to repeat that phrase. You don't have to, because Etsy says you only need to use it once. So if it shows up as a category, you don't need to add it again as a tag. The next thing to consider are attributes. Attributes give extra information about the product that you're selling, and depending on the category that you select for your listing, the attributes you see are going to be different. So if you sell clothing, you're going to see one thing. If you sell patterns like me, you're going to see different offerings for the attributes. And the attributes also are like tags. And so you want to try and select the attributes that will most closely align with what a shopper might be searching for and the terms they might use. I know, like, you probably have figured out that the attributes are not always very precise or exact, so just do the best you can. But also, what I found helpful is to actually look at all the attributes, because sometimes the way I describe something might be limited, but when you see all the possible attributes, you can typically find some additional descriptors for attributes that you can also use to add to your listing. And the more of these you use that are relevant, even if they are general, the more chances that you can show up in searches. So even if you only find general attributes to add, you can get more specific in your tags. And if you find an attribute that works in the list that's given from Etsy, you don't have to repeat that phrase in your tags, because again, the attributes act like tags as well. Next is your titles. When it comes to your titles, it seems like now Etsy is giving the titles equal weight with the categories you search and the attributes that you put. Well, I shouldn't say equal, but that they're considering all this information together when it comes to where you rank in search. And so in the past, I know that there were some help articles that said within the first certain number of characters, you need to have your most important keywords. Well, now the guidance that they're giving is a bit more general. So first they're saying, try and match as closely as possible to what you think a shopper will search for in search, will put into the search bar, and make your titles short, clear, and descriptive. So no more of those long, lengthy titles where you try and use I believe it's 160 characters. They're advising against that. Now they're advising that your titles be shorter because, again, they want you to write for human beings and for people, not for the engine that might be reading it. They still do recommend that you put your the keywords that describe your item the best in the beginning, and so just stick with that. But again, write it so that what a potential shopper is seeing is the most important information that you want to convey. So whatever you want them to know first about your item, put that at the beginning of your title and make it clear in such a way that people can read it. And also, when you're writing your title, don't forget that a lot of people shop on mobile devices. So you want to make sure that your title shows up in a way that's easy to read for people who are on a mobile device. Don't add a list of keywords and tags to your title that will make it confusing, or just to stuff them in there to get them in there. Just keep your title simple and make it what it is. Then you can use the tags and your categories and attributes to give additional information. That's, again, the new recommended guideline when it comes to titles. Tags, again, I feel like we talk about tags so much and that you might get bored of hearing me talk about tags. But again, this is coming from Etsy, so I'm going to tell you what they do recommend when it comes to tags. We've said this before. Use all 13. Sometimes it might take, some creative thinking on your end to try and figure out what a shopper or a buyer might type into the search bar. Again, there's no way to know exactly what somebody is going to look for, but you can try and come pretty close. And so your tags are where you have the most opportunity to use as many terms as possible that you could possibly think of that people would use to find your item. So Etsy provided a list of do's and don'ts when it comes to tagging. So here are the do's. First of all, use all 13 tags. Secondly, use multi-word phrases instead of using just one broad word. You do have 20 characters, up to 20 characters that you can use for your tags. So instead of, and again, I'll use myself as an example because this is what I sell. So instead of using the tag magazine, I will use the tag quilting magazine because it's a bit more specific than just magazine alone or quilting alone. Then also look at your shop stats. And I've started to do this, and it does give a lot of guidance too, because for one, I can see which listings are getting more traffic and which ones are getting less, and then look at the tags on those and then make changes based on that. When it comes to synonyms and phrases that are used in different regions, the Etsy engine is smart enough to make certain substitutions, like in countries where they spell words that are the same, but they spell them differently. The Etsy search machine thing will show both terms. So specifically, jewelry and jewelry. In some parts of the world, they spell it with 2 L's and an E. So Jewellery versus Jewelry. And so search will show both of them, regardless of how it's spelled by a shopper and by you. But if the terms that people use are completely different, then, and you know that people from a particular region use a particular term to describe what you're selling, then you do want to include those regional terms in your tags so that they show up for those searches. And so the example Etsy gives, I was trying to think of one for myself, but I don't know, so I could be missing out on some sales. The example Etsy gives is flip-flops. In the US, we call them flip-flops. In Australia, they call them thong sandals. And so if you have buyers in Australia, or if you want your flip-flops, if that's what you make and sell, to show up in searches by Australian shoppers, then you want to include thong sandals in your tags. And I know I'm originally from Nigeria, and we call flip-flops Dunlops. And so I would, if I wanted to make sure it showed up in searches there, I would probably include that as well. And then finally, long tail keywords. These tend to have longer phrases that are more specific. And recently, I've been focusing on using more long tail keywords in my tags. These are the benefits of doing this is, one, they're less popular, and so you're more likely to show up higher for them. And two, when people search for things, when they're looking for something very specific, they will put in a long tail keyword. So if somebody is looking for a brown leather bracelet, that's what they're going to type in. They're not going to just type in a bracelet or leather bracelet if they're specifically trying to find one that's brown, or if they're looking for snake skin purse. That's what they're going to search for. And so that's what you want to have in your tags, because one, it's a long tail keyword. Two, it's much more specific and much more descriptive of your item. And three, when people do a specific search for that item, then your product is more likely to show up. And just as an aside, in all the new listings I'm trying to focus more on including more long tail keywords. And so I'm trying to avoid the more common, more competitive tags like knitting pattern or sewing pattern and things like that. I'm trying to get even more specific so that even if someone isn't specific, even if more people aren't specifically searching for what I'm selling, when sellers do come on who are looking specifically for that, so someone is looking for German paper craft template, something like that. I know that's too long, but something of that nature. And that comes to mind because I recently just sold that. And I remember when I bought it, I thought, how am I ever going to sell this? It's so unique. Who would want it? And I found 2 of them, and somebody bought both of them. And she said she bought them, because she had wanted them because they reminded her of her childhood. And so that was an exact match. And so that's what I'm focusing on now, is trying to get as specific to the description of the products as I can and putting those in my tags, and just foregoing the more general ones because I just I think the competition is too much and I won't show up. Next are the tagging don'ts. I've kind of already talked about them already, but to summarize, don't repeat your tags. They should all be unique. And even if you do repeat them, when you're putting them in, Etsy will flag you and say you can't use the same tags. But in addition to not repeating them, try and make them as unique as possible. And so keep them descriptive but unique. And Etsy gives some examples in the article that you can look up. Also, don't repeat the categories and attributes. Again, I already mentioned, Etsy says those already act like tags. And so when you select those, that's as good as putting them as tags in your tag section. So you don't have to add them yet again. Don't worry about misspellings. You don't have to put in incorrect spellings. Etsy, the search engine will correct for that. So don't worry about that. Typos and trying to make sure that if someone has a typo, that your listing still shows up. And then also, I talked about tags in multiple languages. You should keep your tags and your titles in the same language as your shop. Etsy will automatically do the translation for people who are searching, but whose language is different from yours. And there is a system for you to add your own translations if you would like to do that, and that will be a separate recording. Okay, so how do you come up with ideas for tags? Etsy offers some guidelines on how to brainstorm different tags for your products. I use different methods. Sometimes I just sit down and think of what words someone might use to look for that particular item. I look for tags within my product, like because I sell supplies and mainly crafting books and magazines and whatnot. And so I'll read the descriptions, and then from there I get ideas about tags to put in it. Sometimes the tags that you might want to add have more than the allotted 20 characters. So what do? Well, Etsy suggests that you break them up into what they call multiple phrasal tags, and the engine will still be able to match those multi-word tags and surface your listings when someone searches. So earlier I said I had this German paper crafting template, and I forgot there's a specific word for it too, but I can't remember the word now. And so I couldn't use German paper crafting template because it's longer than 20 characters. So what Etsy suggests is actually what I did too. So you can break it up into phrases that are more descriptive than just one word phrases. So instead of German paper crafting and template, which are just so broad and don't really describe well the product, I could break that up into German paper crafting and then paper crafting template. And the Etsy search machine will be able to string those together if somebody were to put in that term and see that that was a match, because I'm saying, even though I can't say it all in one tag, that this is a German paper crafting template. If somebody types that into search, Etsy will read my tags and see that I have German paper crafting and paper crafting template, and then make it a match. So you can do the same thing. They give an example using the phrase minimalist diamond engagement rings, and say you can break that up into something like minimalist jewelry, and then diamond ring and engagement ring, etc. And so same idea. Other ways to brainstorm ideas is to use words that describe what you're trying to sell. And so you can look at the categories that you've selected and then add additional descriptive words to it. And so if it's from a certain era, if a certain era describes the product, you can throw that in there, like 1970s baseball hat. I don't know if that's a thing. Or set of XYZ stuff. Then you can also, in your tags, include descriptive words about the technique or the materials that you use. So if you use faux fur to make earmuffs, you can say faux fur earmuffs, or leather purse, or what have you. Or if you use a particular technique, let's say you hammer stuff, or you do custom embroidery or welding, you can say custom embroidered hat, or reclaimed something, or personalized XYZ. So again, you can use words that describe the techniques that you've used to make it, or the materials that you've used to make it, or that were used to make what you're selling. And then another one, which I've started to try and incorporate too, but sometimes forget, is who it's for. Sometimes people will go on Etsy to look for gifts for specific people. And so you can put those in your tags. If what you're making would be a nice gift for a teacher at the end of year, you can put teacher gift. If it's a gift for a newly married guy, you can put gift for new husband, or gift for new dad, or what have you. And so that's perfectly acceptable too, because again, that's a way people search. Now, people also search based on occasions. So either if something is going on, or there's a particular season. So people might be looking for Hanukkah gifts, or Hanukkah, something for Hanukkah, or Christmas ornaments, or what have you. So that could be a way to also describe your items if that applies. Or they could be shopping for, say, a specific anniversary, or an event like a graduation, or what have you. So again, those are terms that can describe when your product can be used, or for whom it can be given, or for whom it was created. And then solution oriented. This is something I hadn't really thought about, but Etsy suggests that if the products you make solve a problem for a shopper, then include that in the description. So if somebody is specifically looking for shoe organizers, or workouts, or what do you call those things? Fitbit bracelets, that type of thing. You can use those in your tags as well. Thinking about how someone can use the product, if that's the way some people might come onto Etsy to look for something. They don't know exactly what they're looking for, but they know what they want to use it for. So that's another way to brainstorm tags. And then the last two ways are size and style. If size is particularly important to what you're selling, then you want to convey that in your tags as well. So if you make earrings and they're big hoops or small hoops or studs, you want to put that in the tags so that it's evident there. And then also style. People look for specific styles of products, and so some people like rusty chic or shabby chic or mid-century modern or what have you. And so if those help to describe your products even more, then go ahead and make sure that those types of tags show up in your make sure that you use those types of descriptors in your tags as well. So hopefully that helps you brainstorm. Another thing I like to do from time to time is I will give one of the kids, I'll just show them something and say, how would you describe this to me? And sometimes it helps because they will describe it in a way I hadn't thought of. Sometimes it doesn't help. It's just not helpful, but every once in a while, I can get some good stuff from that. All right, so that's it for keywords. Next up will be pricing your shipping competitively, and I will be back with that episode in a couple of weeks.